On the 20th of October 1962, China launched an unprovoked attack on Indian positions along the line of actual control. It quickly spiraled into a full-scale border war between the two countries. It lasted 1 month and 1 day. And today, over 60 years after the war, we are still dealing with the fallout of the India-China border war of 1962. There have been a few flashpoints since then, but the LAC between the two countries was largely peaceful. Then, in May 2020, China moved 2 divisions along the LAC and sparked off the first deadly clash between the two sides in 45 years. India has held its ground and now is matching China in a race to build infrastructure along the world's highest mountain ranges. It's what we are calling the Himalayan standoff, and it presents a strategic challenge for Prime Minister Narendra Modi. It's the world's only super high altitude deployment, and it's entering its 4th winter now with over 100,000 Indian soldiers watchful about China's next moves. Joining me on the show today is Ambassador Suresh Goel, who has spent over 3 decades in the Foreign Service and closely looked at China. Ambassador Goel, welcome to the News9 Plus show.
Thank you very much.
I want to start by asking you, India has never had an aspiring superpower on its doorstep, and today we have a rising China, an aggressive China, a not so friendly China. How does India handle this aspiring dragon, an aspiring superpower on its doorstep?
Very uncomfortable. That's the first reaction that comes to my mind. Also at the same time, something totally unforeseen, totally unexpected, in the sense that traditionally we have looked at China as a kind of a comparable civilization, friendly, with similar kind of ambitions in terms of their place in the global politics, the global happenings. There was a war in '62, and there are several explanations for that. Really, territorial ambitions was not really the major part of it. There were several factors like connectivity to Xinjiang, etc., which came into play. But mostly, it was thought that it was a reaction, it was a way to manage the developments within China and to deal with the domestic politics, to create a diversion or to create a challenge somewhere else. What we now have, and I think we should have seen it happening, is where China began to grow economically, and not just economically. In 1970s, when China announced the 4 modernizations, I think at that time it was quite clear that China has ambition to become a global superpower. When they talked about economic, military modernization, etc., etc. But I think at that time, Deng Xiaoping, the way he operated, he didn't create that kind of a fear in the neighborhood, and in fact, he tried to basically carry it like, and he did, in terms of improving relations with the neighbors. India, particularly, he called India.
Hide your strength and bide your time. That's the famous
in the case of
example,
India, it was basically not just bide your time or hide your strength. It was basically, he did consider India as a country with which they need to have good relations, really. It's as China developed economically and became an economic superpower, except for a brief period in 90s. When late 90s, the end of the millennium, when India began to catch up with China in terms of the faster economic growth rate, the China began to look at India as a kind of a competitor, and then again we have been left behind. So China's ambitions were fairly obvious in the beginning of this millennium. It was just that the change of the leader of China to Xi Jinping has made it more clear and more visible. And now there is no really going back to the earlier days when we could think of China as a country with which we could have equitous relationship.
Interesting you should bring in Xi Jinping, because a lot of people call Xi Jinping, he's the most powerful Chinese leader since Deng Xiaoping. And even going back, Mao Zedong, they call him a new Mao. And do you think we actually have a problem with China, or is it a leadership issue, a problem with President Xi Jinping? Because he's very ambitious, he wants to make China the #1 power in the world. His ambitions are very clearly mentioned.
I think China would have become a problem sooner or later as it grew in terms of the comprehensive national power. China is far, far ahead of India.
Right.
And China is not a country culturally or civilizationally which would actually hide its strength. It would use the strength to basically gain a dominant position in the region. So it would have happened sooner or later.
Irrespective of which leader was in
irrespective of who the
power.
leader is. It is just that in the case of Xi Jinping, it has become more aggressively visible than it could have been.
And it's, you mentioned that its territorial ambitions have also been increasing, and it's got problems with all of its neighbors, and especially in our case, their claims seem to be growing by the day. They're claiming entire parts of Arunachal and Ladakh. These are all parts of India.
We do look at strategic ambitions of China very clearly as territorial ambitions.
Right.
Because that is how they manifest. But I think if you look at it deeper, these ambitions of China are not just territorial. These ambitions of China are to let everybody know who is the boss and who commands influence in the area. If you talk about South China Seas, occupation of area, those islands in South China Seas is not just territorial, but they have to expand their areas of influence beyond what they have.
It's about talking about who's the number one power.
Who's the number one?
Yeah.
And more, they need to have this area for their own strategic expansion, strategic projection.
But in our case, for instance, now Ladakh is an area that they've claimed right up to their claim lines in the 50s, and then Arunachal Pradesh as well, they've claimed those. Is it a thing of territorial ambition, or is it to kind of tell India that they are the regional power and India can never aspire to?
Later.
Right.
They are very clearly saying, don't challenge me.
Right. So it's the Chinese emperor syndrome.
It's the Chinese, and every Chinese has it. I remember when I was in China, there was one Chinese who looked at me in the eyes and said, "Ni kan wo was a Chungwaran, wo puhe putwe," meaning I'm a Chinese. I can never be wrong.
Okay. Right.
So that is how Chinese operate.
Was that gentleman a government official, or
no.
was he
just a minor person on the road?
Right.
Somebody normal completely. But a normal Chinese would still think that he is the center of the universe.
Right. You think that is a problem that we face with China in the boundary talks with?
I think it's very, very, very difficult for China to compromise on the positions.
Right. And in fact, we've been on the border with China. It's been largely quiet. There was a stated government policy not to develop the infrastructure for decades, right until the 90s, until when China started building up very rapidly, and that's when India started to follow suit. But until 2014, I think the road building wasn't at the speed that it is today. And in fact, we sent a News9 Plus team to spend some time along the LAC with Depsang, at Depsang. Let's listen into their report.
China has earmarked $25 billion just for Tibet in its current 5-year plan. This strengthens China's expansionist plans. But India has decided to limit the dragon. So in last few years, India has been building along LAC on war footing. News9 Plus brings you an exclusive peek into the infrastructure build-up near the line of actual control. So, this is the way to Demchok. And you can see on the mountain there is a bunker also. On the top of the mountain is India's observation post. And the brown mountains that you can see opposite to this mountain is China. We cannot take the camera out of the vehicle because it is not allowed. So from inside the vehicle, as far as I am able to show you, I will try to show you. So the mountain in the middle, the small mountain, on top of that mountain is the Chinese post, and they must be observing our vehicle moving on the road. And this is the road built by BRO to Demchok, India's first village.
One of the main roads which I mentioned to you was the Trishul-Dungti-Phukche-Demchok road, which runs almost parallel to the LSE for almost 121 odd kilometers.
CDFD road, as you have traveled on that road, it's a tough road, and it is situated on an average height of 14,500 feet, and working at that height also becomes very difficult for our people. At places it is 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers, at places it is 1.5 kilometers also. There was no road as close to LSE earlier.
Yes, we have started this year, and we have almost reached from Demchok to Phukche, and we are planning to complete this road by next working season. That is my target, and my BRTF has been moved basically for this road only, for CDFD road and the Neoma LG. Beyond this road, we won't be building any roads towards the LSE.
Total cost is approximately 450 crores, and today if you take a stock of the road, it is approximately 15 to 17% of the road has been constructed. Now we are accelerating it more because now the work has stabilized and we have inducted more machines, more people. Our endeavor is to complete this by September next year. Otherwise, its official PDC is May 25.
From Demchok, we have reached Phukche through a road which is 121 kilometers long and is being built along the LAC. And you can see this is the road that is being built, and not more than 1 kilometer from this road towards those mountains is Tibet. And those are the Tibetan mountains that you can see on our camera. The distance to LAC from this road is not more than 1 kilometer. As we moved ahead along the Indus Valley on the strategically important CDFD road, we could see Chinese posts often on the other side of the river. One of it could be seen for many kilometers. We were told that we were under observation for sure. We too had our posts on our side. It is an eyeball-to-eyeball contact between Indian Army and PLA soldiers here.
We can put our troops if the situation arises, so they can move all along the LAC in the forward locations and posts as early as possible. DSDBO road is also going along the LAC, and it facilitates our troops to get deployed as far forward as possible till Daulat Beg Oldi, which is the ALG there and in the northmost region. Now we are working on an alternate connectivity to DSDBO, because DSDBO is in the show window, or it is any troop movement can be monitored and seen by the adversary. Instead of going on DSDBO road, they can go use this alignment and reach DBO without getting noticed.
China views Tibet as the palm, and Ladakh has one of the fingers, then Sikkim has one of the fingers, Bhutan has one of the fingers, Nepal has one of the fingers, and Arunachal has one more finger. So in the strategic calculus of China, all these areas are extremely sensitive. And if you look at collusion between Pakistan and China, then Ladakh takes priority.
Strategic importance of Ladakh, you know, and everyone knows in the present circumstances, is very high. And we need to strengthen this security. So this road network supports our security forces to go as much forward as ahead. And they don't feel deficiency of network to do the job which is assigned to them to secure the borders.
There are two nations which have attacked us in the past. Pakistan, 1947-48, 1965, 1971, 1999 Kargil, China, 1962. So if you have belligerent states on your border, and at the drop of the hat, they would like to exploit if you have any weakness. So it is very significant. We have got to be prepared around the year, 24/7.
take your mind back to 1984 when we occupied Siachen Glacier, although it had been a part of our territory all through. But what happened to Pakistan? What was the sensitivity that got triggered? Because for them, that is the point which keeps China, Pakistan away. And also remember that Shaksgam Valley, which was a part of the Pak-occupied Kashmir, Gilgit, Baltistan, northern areas as they used to call it, was gifted away illegally by Pakistan to China. So obviously for them, Ladakh, Siachen Glacier, these are extremely sensitive for them.
Out of 90 border road projects recently inaugurated by the Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, 25 are in Ladakh.
Ladakh, we are putting lot of funds, and this year it is approximately 1,500 crores. But as the work progresses, it will increase because there will be a lot of more roads being completed and Neoma airfield is coming up. So this may go up to 2,500 or so at the end of the year as the work progresses.
My BRTF approximately handling a 1,400 crore project, which include construction of approximately 201 kilometer road, new roads, maintenance of 205 kilometer roads, as I told you, and then construction of 4 important bridges connecting Hanle to the remote villages. Very important is Neoma LG, which will be, once constructed, highest airfield in the world. We will be starting one work also, Likaru Migla Pukche. To tell you more about this road, once constructed, this road will be again the highest road in the world.
We are also focusing on air infrastructure. Our Neoma Air Force Station, that is coming in a major way. So you have road connectivity, and then you have the air connectivity, so as to say. I'm sure that is going to be a game changer. Other smaller roads are also happening in a major way, which are all designed to make places closer to each other.
And that story tells you about the breakneck speed with which India is now building infrastructure, the highest road, the highest airfield, the highest tunnels. And in fact, I lost count of the number of highs that we've been hitting off late along the LAC. Ambassador Goel, tell us what has been the biggest change in India's mindset since the 1962 war. Is there a greater sense of self-confidence now when we are facing off China?
I think the change in our mindset began to happen not now, not 10 years earlier, but I think more than 10 years earlier, even during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's time, there was a clear consciousness that if we want to strengthen our security in the border areas, the old philosophy of not developing infrastructure is not going to work.
Right.
Earlier, if we did not develop the infrastructure in the border areas, the philosophy was defensive.
Right.
We have become more proactive with the idea that we need to really project our power logistics into the border areas to be effective in defenses also. And therefore, right around 2010, there were delegations which went from here. I know that very well. I think it happened during the time when Ambassador Shamsaran, he was a foreign secretary, maybe around that time, and that's the reason I think 2010 or sometime, that it was around that time that we began to rethink and review our policy of the border defenses, and there was a serious recommendation at that time to build up infrastructure.
This is when China had already built up on the Tibetan plateau, they put out
China
the
had
railroads
built up parts of it on the Tibetan
Right.
plateau, etc. They were already building up. But we had not reacted to that.
Right.
Our border development was not a reaction to China's border development. We had two other factors. One is that our side of the border is actually not a plateau. Tibet is a
Right.
plateau.
Yes.
It's easier to develop infrastructure on the Tibetan side, which is
And
level.
we are on the mountain slopes.
We are on the
Yeah.
mountain slope.
Right.
It's not easy to really build all that network, etc.
Right.
So both the cost, feasibility, and also the need, the philosophy, they all came into play. Once we took a decision that yes, we need to build up our infrastructure, we have gone at that. But now I think the factor is coming in terms of the geographical stability of the terrain.
Right. And so we've actually seen the breakneck speed at which the roads and all are being constructed, and especially after Galwan. And we have this story on Galwan 2.0, we are calling it. There was a flashpoint in Arunachal Pradesh in December 2022 when the Indian Army repulsed a Chinese incursion into that area, which was a site of a clash in the 1962 war. And we'll just play that story out.
This particular event happened on 9th of December, and this is in the upper reaches of Tawang, which is a mountainous region, and of course China calls it as part of their southern Tibet. That the Indian Patrolling Party suddenly noticed that the Chinese were trying to transgress into the Indian territory. In this particular event on December 9th, there were fistfights that ensued. There were these melee weapons that were used, and finally there were injuries to at least 9 to 15 Indian soldiers, fractures that were reported, and then they were flown into Guwahati. And as per intelligence reports, there were at least, if not more, 25 Chinese PLA soldiers who had grievous serious injuries as well.
This area traditionally has been a disputed area. It's been a regular feature that the Chinese try and come in and that the Indian troops stop them from coming. The last instance was in October 2021.
Indian soldiers striking Chinese soldiers with batons, using fists to prevent the Chinese from advancing. This video from 2021 shows fierce fighting in the same area of Tawang in Arunachal Pradesh.
Particularly at a time when you know that you already have a problem which is ongoing on the LAC in eastern Ladakh. Trying to open up another front, trying to engage in this kind of activity, I would call it, very provocative and also highly sort of risky and dangerous.
3466 is the line of actual control, but if you look at our map, which the boundary we show in our Survey of India maps, that is 4,056 kilometers. So we'll talk of the line of actual control because the boundary which we show and China shows their own boundary. So there's a big international boundary, there's a big difference. China tries to creep inwards, southwards towards India, but we have not allowed them ever since I can remember now. Wherever they try to do it, we push them back.
So I wouldn't say it's something, as I said, it's something new. Both sides had upped their military capability, military force levels. There was a report of 3 sort of brigades that had come in opposite the eastern sector from the Chinese side. We had also stepped up our infrastructure building. I won't say this is something that has suddenly happened.
From May of 2020, Chinese and Indian troops have engaged in a series of face-offs at multiple locations along the Sino-Indian border. In June of 2020, the two armies clashed in Galwan, which resulted in the deaths of Chinese and Indian soldiers.
According to my judgment, it is Xi Jinping. His strategy was to do something spectacular before the 20th Congress, which was held in October. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed. In fact, they lost more people than us. We lost 20, we declared it. They said we have lost only 2 or 4, whereas they lost something like 40, 50, 60. God knows, Western analysis and sources tell us it's more than 40, 50. So they didn't tell the countrymen what has happened.
The Indians and the Chinese used melee weapons. The Chinese have been using these clubs that are spiked clubs. They have those spikes on it. There are other sticks, plastic as well as wooden sticks that are used, but there's no gun that is used. It was almost after 40 years of peace and tranquility agreement between the two countries that in Galwan, guns were fired so that there is dispersal of crowd. It wasn't at each other.
Now that clash less than a year ago tells us why India needs to be watchful along the LAC. And I want to bring in my colleague Aditya Rajkaul, who covered that flashpoint in Arunachal. Aditya, welcome. We're entering the 4th year of our winter deployment along the line of actual control. Multiple flashpoints across the LAC. Is there a possibility that China could use this lull along the border and our distractions with various other issues to pressurize us somewhere along the LAC?
Absolutely, that's been the mindset really for a very long time, and it isn't anything new. Of course, our policy towards China has drastically changed over the last 4 years, ever since Galwan really happened. But as you rightly pointed out, Sandeep, our documentary really focused on the second Galwan 2.0, and that was in Yangtze, in Arunachal, in the Tawang sector, where again there was a kind of intrusion. There was in fact almost like a fist fight and confrontation in which 20 of our soldiers were injured. Although these were minor injuries, but this was yet another attempt just like Galwan. Of course, in Galwan it happened after 40 years. There was some kind of firing as well, and we lost at least 20 to 21 of our soldiers. And ever since that, there's been a growing realization in New Delhi that we need to bring in a paradigm shift, both in our military policy and our diplomatic policy as well. We've been working on it, but I think much more needs to be done, including infrastructure, because China has been working on it for years together since the Sino-India war, and we have woken up to it much later. And you could actually see, if you visit to the front areas of Ladakh, Arunachal and several other LAC points, that on the other side there's massive construction that has happened. There are actually structures that have come in, and this intrusion has been happening continuously. In Depsang, for instance, there are 5 locations where there is a confrontation happening, and as you pointed out about Galwan, ever since that there have been 19 rounds of dialogue, but China does not want to relent at all.
China doesn't want to relent, and it continues to build up on infrastructure. In fact, we keep a very careful watch on the China border, and my colleague Nivriti Mohan obtained some commercial satellite imagery to show us how the PLA built a new military camp, complete with accommodation for its soldiers, winter billeting for its troops, in just a matter of months, just 50 kilometers away from the LAC. Let's listen into that story. Over 60 years after the India-China border war, China's speed of infrastructure building continues to concern us. The LAC between India and China is over 3,000 kilometers long. Now, over the last few years, China has built roads, airfields, bridges, military camps and tunnels along the LAC. This allows the PLA to rapidly move troops right up to the LAC to threaten India, which is what they did in May 2020. But today, we want to talk about the central sector, which is the area of the LAC facing China. It covers the states of Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. The central sector is around 545 kilometers long, and it's been largely peaceful except for a stray incident in 2019. But interestingly, beginning this year, China started building a camp just 50 kilometers away from the line of actual control across Himachal Pradesh. The site of the camp is in a river valley in Tibet, and it's near a place called Rubang. My colleague Nivriti Mohan recently spent a week covering India's infrastructure build-up in Ladakh. She obtained these exclusive satellite images from Sentinel. Sentinel is a commercial satellite with a resolution of 10 meters. It passes over the LAC every 5 days, and we've managed to track China's camp building activity in this sector, the central sector. Nivriti, just run us through what the experts have told you about this very interesting new Chinese camp that's come across the central sector and the LAC.
So this is the camp, this is the location where the camp has come up, and it is just 50 kilometers from the line of actual control in the middle sector between Himachal and Uttarakhand. So this has come up here, just 50 kilometers.
Right, so
this is the location.
March, where there's no activity this year.
Right.
There's zero activity. It's a river valley, it's quiet, peaceful, there's no activity.
We can see that this is the area which is occupied.
Right.
But the images of March show that there is no activity.
Now in May, you suddenly start seeing vehicles being parked there. There's some signs of activity in that region.
Right.
Interesting.
We spoke to the experts.
Yeah.
And the experts told us that this U
You can see the red U here.
Yeah, I see those.
This could be the parked vehicles,
here.
Yeah. And these red spots here.
Right.
These could be some military tents or stores.
Stores, that's kept under camouflage netting or something.
Yeah, the black spots above here. Somewhere here, the black spots are there. These could be the military stores which are under camouflage.
Right, right.
So this has come up within the period of 7 months only, starting from March, where there was no activity in this area.
Right, and this is a central sector where usually there's no controversy. We don't have any disputes in the central sector. But now what are we seeing here, Nivriti? Now we're looking at September.
This is the latest image of
images.
September.
Right.
Now earlier we were seeing here some signs of temporary tents which looked white signs over here.
So this is temporary.
But now you can see some permanent structures which have come up here. Around 2 to 4 permanent structures are there, and some temporary tents are there. So it has come as a full-fledged military camp of PLA here now. Occupation is nearly complete, and they have built probable winter structures here to support their troops in winters as well. That means that they are going to stay here in winters.
So from an area where there was absolutely no military activity, in a span of just 6 months, the PLA has just created a camp like in the middle of nowhere. There's just wilderness, and there, in the span of 6 months, they've created this new camp. So in the span of just 6 months, the PLA has just created a camp in the middle of the wilderness. What are the experts telling you about the kind of troops that would be deployed over here? Would it be a battalion, most likely?
Yes, they will be deploying a battalion here, and they will be staying here in the winters. That means they are going to stay here in winters. They are not earlier. What PLA used to do is that they used to build some temporary camps, and then they would go back in winters.
Right.
But this time along, it seems that they have built some permanent structures here, and they are going to stay here in winters.
So this winter, it's very interesting. So as we are entering the 4th consecutive winter after the tensions with the PLA began in 2020, the PLA has just prepared a new camp across the LAC in a sector that was believed to be quiet until now. And now we have the permanent presence of the PLA, a battalion or a battalion plus, in an area that was believed to be quiet without any disputes. But right now, just 50 kilometers away from the LAC, you have a PLA unit that's sitting there waiting for winter to set in. So that new camp in the central sector is meant to accommodate at least a brigade, if not a battalion of the PLA, and that's one more reason why India is going to be wary and watchful this summer. Ambassador Goel, do you think that the purpose of the PLA building up its infrastructure so rapidly over the last 2 decades is actually meant for this? Chinese acupressure all along the LAC, from Arunachal Pradesh to Ladakh, they can, choose a place that they want to harass us at.
When we look at China building infrastructure along the border, when we talk about Ladakh, we talk about Dolatul Baguldi, and then we talk about Depsang, and then we talk about Arunachal Pradesh. These are all different areas. So I think to talk about each area, every area in the same breath, will be a bit of really losing the granular picture. Arunachal Pradesh is slightly different, really. Right. Arunachal Pradesh is more like a issue of claim on Little Tibet Buddhism.
Right.
And for China, the Little Tibet is very important to maintain its hold on Dalai Lama.
Right.
The Dalai Lama should be selected, should be appointed by China and therefore to maintain that Buddhism, that they have and therefore Arunachal Pradesh, they will continue to give a hold, they will continue to create pinpricks, but I think there would be a kind of a limit there. They will not, beyond the claims on the AP, they will not go beyond a point.
Right.
But other areas, Depsang and other areas, I think their idea of building the infrastructure to keep India under pressure.
To keep India under pressure. That's what Aditya mentioned, that 20 rounds of talks, no resolution to Depsang. They've not vacated Depsang.
There will be I don't think we can expect to have any resolution in immediate future also.
Right.
Even though there are some expectations that there could be, but
so the Chinese acupressure is going to continue in Depsang
so.
and in all the other areas. In fact, I want to bring in this interview with the DG BRO, the then DG BRO, Lieutenant General Rajiv Chaudhary, who retired recently, where he mentions this 100% increase in the BRO's funding in the last decade and how the Border Roads Organization has managed to build an infrastructure in the most difficult terrain in the last couple of years. Let's listen in.
You see, on 12th of September, 90 projects and dedicating to the nation. 23 roads, 62 bridges, 1 tunnel, Nichipu tunnel, 2 airfields, that is Bagdogra and Barakpur, and 2 helipads, costing approximately 2,400 crores. Out of these 90 projects, there are 8 roads and 17 bridges, which are coming, 26 of them are coming only in Ladakh. So that makes it approximately 28% of the complete projects, and 36 projects in Arunachal Pradesh. That is 8 roads and 26 bridges, costing approximately 800 crores. That makes it to 33% of the complete cost of all these 90 projects. So you can understand the cost or the funds what we are putting in Ladakh and Arunachal. That is 60% of our complete BRO budget. I'll tell you, I'll take back you 2 years back. In 2021, we had got 102 projects inaugurated by Honorable Raksha Mantri and got dedicated to the nation. In the year 22, we got 103 projects dedicated to the nation by Honorable Raksha Mantri ji. Now this year, by September itself, we are getting 90 projects inaugurated. And by December, our efforts or endeavor is to get another 60 projects. So making it 150 plus projects in 1 year alone. So you see from 2 years, what was 102, we are crossing 150. So it is 1.5 times in 2 years alone. And the cost itself, earlier it was 2,200 crores. This year, by September itself, we are crossing 2,400 crores.
So there were clearly 3 bottlenecks before 2014. It appears that there was a financial bottleneck, a doctrinal and a strategic bottleneck. Ambassador Goel, could you tell us how the government in the last decade or so has kind of overcome all of these to build infrastructure at the pace that it's doing? It's one area that we're kind of catching up with the Chinese. We may not be that on their backs when it comes to the economy, but at least infrastructure wise we seem to be getting there.
It's a difficult process, as you read out the report from the BRO also, and it's a very difficult process given the kind of terrain. But I had gone to Leh in 2011 or 2012, and already there was quite a rapid development of roads in that area up to Pangkong Lake, and where you see now the road being built, there was leveling already begun there, and you could actually go across there. So I think the main point really here is a commitment that we need to really do it, and to be able to keep our defenses in position and to be able to match up to China's aggression really in the area. I think another challenge that we have in the area is the geographical instability. So when we undertake the development of the area, the infrastructure, we need to be quite conscious of the fact that technologically it should be done in a manner that it does not in any way create more dangers and risk for the people living in the area. Otherwise it becomes really infectious, like in the case of Joshimath.
Of course.
So that's what I would say really.
Right. Aditya, we've been tracking conflicts across the world now. You have one, the Russia-Ukraine war that's entering probably its 3rd year very soon. You have the Israel's conflict with Hamas, and there's China's ambitions on Taiwan. Do you think that this issue that we have with China on the LAC is on the back burner for now, given the fact that China is involved on multiple fronts?
That's right. China has been engaged in diplomacy, so as to say, and of course militarily trying to provoke Taiwan in entering their air defense area, and of course the kind of diplomacy that we have seen unfolding over the last couple of years. But particularly, I would like to also emphasize on the recently concluded G20, where China skipped, and without giving any reason. The Chinese president,
Xi Jinping didn't attend.
He wasn't there. The Premier Li Qiang was there, and while the Russian president gave a reason, there were others who gave reasons, but the Chinese did not. So they actually deliberately did not want to attend for best known reasons. And of course, the success of India emerging as an important country globally in global diplomacy, Modi's statement that this is not an era of war, and the G20 consensus finally happening in the absence of Chinese president.
And when there's a full-scale war on in Ukraine.
Yeah, so it's a strong message to China as well. And China certainly wants to check this rise of India because it considers that, if India's rise really happens at this pace, of course, with bilateral relations with China, India will be much more focused, much more, have much more weight, so as to say.
Okay, and so Taiwan is keeping China busy. The Russia-Ukraine war, Israel, Hamas, all of this is keeping China distracted, busy. The LAC is on the back burner for now, but like you said, Aditya, we can't keep our eyes off the ball in the LAC because exactly this is what happened about 3 years back, where everyone thought that, things were finally on a even keel with the Chinese, and look what they did. But Ambassador Goel, what has changed from 1962 and 2023? Apart from the mindset, has there been any other change in the way that India sees China, regards it as a strategic threat? I remember there was this whole big build-up of Hindi Chini bhai bhai, but at the same time, the Prime Minister at that time, Prime Minister Nehru, was a little wary of the Chinese, though I think finally it was the military battle that we lost.
I think the global geopolitics has changed so much since 1962, and it has been 60 years since then. It has tremendous change really. If you remember 1962, when the war took place, there was no country which came to even morally support us really. Today we know that there will be countries, even if they do not militarily intervene, but they will be on our side politically. Politically there will be countries to speak in our support. That's one big change. Number two, both China and India, they know that in terms of economic command, economic influence globally, they both are important. Earlier in 1962, we were both developing countries, least developed countries. Our contribution to the global economy was minimal. Nobody bothered really. Today, anything happening between India and China, there will be a concern. Both the countries will be concerned. Therefore, I think there will be less inclination for the two countries to go to a full-scale war. Skirmishes, yes, minor actions, yes, but not a full-scale war. At least this is my
But a border, not even a full-scale border war. But Aditya, what do you reckon are India's chances on a border war? If a border war of the kind that we saw in 1962 breaks out again, God forbid, in 2023, is the Indian military better prepared than in 2023 than what it was in 62?
Of course, since Galwan happened, our focus has completely changed from Pakistan to China.
The rebalancing, as they call it.
The rebalancing, and this should have happened years ago. I mean, we had put a lot of emphasis, a lot of narrative on Pakistan, which wasn't really required. And we have ignored Pakistan to a great extent ever since Pulwama and Balakot, rightly so. And a lot of focus, a lot of money, a lot of infrastructure, and a lot of ammunition and men are actually focused towards China. But I quite also agree with Ambassador Goel when he initially mentioned that, for the Chinese, they are the center of the universe. And that's why they disregard, India completely. They disregard India's, growth, the foreign policy growth, or their stature really growing. The Chinese had also objected to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam being the
saying
slogan
it's
of
Sanskrit
G20.
and it's not an official UN language.
Absolutely. So, there is this kind of, I would say, ego or some kind of an understanding where they just don't want to, include Indians anywhere possible. But otherwise, I think the military is prepared. But just like Ambassador Goel said, that it won't be a full-scale war. It will be provocations. It will be incursions. It will be, as part of the China dream, really, of Xi Jinping. They will continuously do this. And of course, they go with this Maoist, philosophy of being not just the aggressor, but having a very sharp methodology to actually make India agree to their conditions their way.
Right, right. So there won't be full-scale war. That's a great takeaway. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I'm afraid we are completely out of time. Thanks for joining me, Ambassador Goel, Aditya. Keep tracking the news and developments only on the News 9 Plus show. Thanks for watching.